Welcome everyone to another episode of Offbeat Talks, where we look forward to looking back. Now, this week is a very different week. It's a very different interview. Now, by the time you see this, all this is being recorded in mid-August, so things might have changed, things might have adapted, but the learnings that we can take from everyone that we've interviewed, and especially from our guest today, they're timeless and priceless, and quite rightly so. Joining us today, we're going to talk data, we're going to talk cake, we're going to talk earthen lamp. Vishalakshi Roy, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
No worries. So one of the things she's great at is giving advice. She made a living out of it, giving advice of many sorts. And also the openness to sit down and have a chat. Now, she had that way before probably starting this job, but it certainly helps. And I wanted to start actually with an extract of an Agatha Christie novel, see if you can pick up which one it is.
Okay.
And it says, everything must be taken into account. If the fact will not fit the theory, then let the theory go.
Ooh, I don't know which one it is, but I'm sure I've come across it because I am a bit of a detective novel fan. Yeah, go on. You have to tell me.
It's The Mysterious Affair at Styles. That's Agatha Christie's very first novel of 1916. And I don't know if I was reading Agatha Christie or I was reading an extract from, say, a masterclass in strategic development, because it is very much fact-driven, and sometimes in the arts, we need to kind of sit down and look at the numbers, for as un-art-like as that may seem. So today's interview is dedicated to everyone here that kind of want to jump behind the scenes, that have a natural curiosity for what goes on behind most art events, cultural events, and what we can take from here. Now, you used to, when did you start doing, or not doing, but reading detective mysteries and murder mysteries on Agatha Christie and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, from what I gather?
Yeah. So I actually read, this is quite embarrassing, I read the complete works of Arthur Conan Doyle, which was my first sort of series, if you may. I would have been about 11. And yeah, and I have to be, I have to be honest and say I didn't actually get all of it. I probably only got, in terms of the language and the usage of words, I probably only got about 60-70% of it. But I was fascinated in the way the stories were, the stories were sort of narrated, but also like how, how things unfurled and how things were revealed, and that's kind of, trying to kind of get behind things and trying to understand a scenario or how people think or react or how they might act in the future. I've always been fascinated by sort of trying to get into people's heads.
Did you used to read many English authors when you were a kid?
Yeah, so I did. I mean, I grew up in India, and I went to an English school. So basically, read quite a lot of fairly serious English authors. But yeah, I was a bit of a bookworm. I liked to read a lot. So I was one of those kids you would find sitting in the corner and just reading.
I mean, that quite kind of introspective, deep thought like person kind of conjures up. However, that it's a great contrast with the wittiness of say a Sherlock Holmes that then kind of just bursts in any place and kind of solves a mystery in 5 seconds. Now, obviously, in the arts management and cultural sector, it isn't as easy as kind of casting a magic spell. But did that critical thinking happen due to that literature, or was that already something within you, or that you honed as a young person?
I think I've always been a very curious person. I've always wanted to know what's going on. I've always asked a lot of questions. My parents will tell you that. I've always wanted to know everything that's going on around me. So I think my interest in detective novels, which still exists, by the way, I've just finished reading one, has come from my curious nature. So it's kind of, it all feeds off each other, really.
in that I'm quite curious, because I also went to a Peruvian British school, so I also consumed a lot of English literature. I'm actually reading Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Brilliant so far. I want to finish Orwell first and then jump to Bradbury. But yeah, I'm having my fair share of English literature. So it's quite nice that we both kind of ended up in Britain looking into British arts and culture. So, you know, that's we've come a long way since then. Today's program is also dedicated, or at least aimed, or hopefully a lot of our international students coming to Britain will feel a bit more at home with two overseas, as we're classed. Well, now you're British Indian now. You got a British passport.
No, I don't. I don't.
Oh, you don't? All right.
Yeah, I'm still a holder of an Indian passport. So.
Oh well, there you go. Two classed overseas workers here. No, that's great. I'm quite curious. So, how else would you say entertain yourself as a kid in India? We certainly don't know of that, so it'd be really great to hear that experience from you.
Yeah, I mean, I come from quite an artistic family, so there's a lot of singing and dancing and writing. You know, it goes back a few generations. My granddad used to do plays, radio plays. My dad was very much involved in theatre and in music. And all his brothers and sisters were as well. My mum trained as a professional dancer, and they both were in a group that did folk music and dances, not just from all over India, but from all over the world. So I kind of grew up in that environment where there was a lot of culture around, and a lot of our entertainment or, you know, extracurricular activities were quite artistic. I was absolutely rubbish, and I continue to be rubbish at sport. I can't do any sports. So a lot of entertainment was around either listening to music or classes or performing. It was lots of reading. We used to play outside a lot, you know, something that just never happens very much anymore. And
what was it like?
What was it like playing outside? Well,
I mean, I've had my own experiences of playing outside, but that's for another podcast.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, you know, it was exactly what I guess playing outside in this country used to be, maybe going back a few more years, because, you know, there was no health and safety rules. You just did what you did and hope for the best. Try not to get run over and stuff, because obviously India is a very populated country, so you couldn't move without, you know, people around you. As we grew up, you know, we also did quite a lot of social. I mean, in India, there's always a lot of people. No surprises there. But, you know, we would friends would get together and do things. We'd go to each other's houses and, you know, sit down and read together, or, you know, kind of get together and you know, cook or make something, create stuff. So yeah, it was good. It was really good growing up.
And cooking wise, since you've touched on that, I know from a very good source, or many good sources, that you've got a sweet tooth.
Yes, I am.
You've got a very sweet tooth. Tell us about the sweets of India, and if there is any place we can get them here from Indian immigrants that might be here.
Yeah, there's loads of very good sweets to be had. My mum's from a place called Calcutta, from Bengal, and actually Bengalis, or people from that area, are very well known for how good their sweets are, and especially Calcutta is like how Paris is known for its patisserie. Calcutta is known for its many sweet shops with you know, very intricate and beautiful sweets. So I come from an area where sweets is a way of life, and we speak sweetly and we eat a lot of sweets. So yeah, I carried that across here, and my husband's family is very much into baking, so actually it's a really good, you know, in a way, maybe that's why we're together. Who knows? But yeah, there's a lot of sweets and sweet things in my life because of it.
Can you tell us about a specific? Do you know if I would actually like for you to get into a specific sweet from the times that you played as a kid, but also tapping onto. We're based in the Midlands, by the way. If anyone is watching from the Midlands, do take directions if you want to try out some of these sweets. I don't know any of those places myself. I can point to a Peruvian restaurant in Birmingham, which is quite good, I hear. Hopefully it's doing deliveries and surviving as best it can. But can you tell us a bit about a sweet in particular, and perhaps where to find
Yeah, sure. I
Indian
mean, I
sweets?
lived before I moved to Warwickshire. I lived in Birmingham for quite a few years, and actually Birmingham's got some very good sweet shops. My favorite one is Millen's, which is in the Balti Triangle in Birmingham. So they do a whole range of North Indian sweets, of which there's a particular type of sweet called barfi, and barfi basically are usually either square or rectangular pieces of sweet, but you get barfis in all kinds of flavors. So from pistachio to chocolate to coconut, you name it. So if you're going
like a
up,
type of jelly, aren't they?
they're not jelly as much as it's kind of bit in between a fudge and a sort of cottage cheese thing. So it's the consistency somewhere in between those two. So that's quite good. And if you're in Warwickshire, Leamington Spa's got a very good Indian sweet shop, and I'm sure Coventry does as well. So yeah, there's loads available. You just have to kind of dig a little.
So is it that correct to assume that you would be, say, book open, munching on sweets, kind of on the corner, kind of just in your own, close in your own world as a kid?
I try not to munch on too many because, it's probably not the healthiest thing to do. Right now, that's harder. It used to be like that a little bit more. Right now it's harder because I'm now a mum to a 2-year-old, so that keeps me on my toes. So
they take the sweets off you.
Yes, and she's an amazing sweet tooth as well. So there you go. So there's competition now.
There we go. One raised.
But yeah, I mean, those moments of being able to sit in a corner with a book and sweets are probably on hold for a few years. But I'm hoping we'll get back to it.
Okay, no, that's very nice. And here we always encourage to look a bit beyond just the front and the face of director of Earthen Lamp. I'm certainly quite interested in the stories behind. And if there are any Indian students that might want to jump into the UK, there certainly is a different culture, and we'll get to identity, which is a big topic for you in a bit. But so you went to university in Calcutta as well. Tell us a bit about the difference between higher education in India and the UK, since you are a teacher at Warwick, assistant professor. So I'm kind of banking on your experience on both ends, first as a student and then as a teacher.
I mean, India's a huge country, so there's a lot of variety when it comes to, well, everything, but definitely education as well. The higher education that I accessed in India before I moved to the UK to study was very good. But the culture of education is quite different. It's everything is quite mass, and I, this is of course my opinion, and I'm sure other people might have feel differently, but I didn't feel that the education system, higher education system in India, prepared me to think critically, which is something that is quite important in higher education in the UK. So that came as a bit of a shock to the system. The fact that I was allowed to critique and I had to think critically, and I had to have a lot of my own opinions. So all of that was a bit of a struggle to start with. I did horribly in my first couple of essays. So now when I'm teaching students, and especially foreign students from India, but other places as well, they come and tell me, I just don't know how to present a critical analysis. I pretty much failed my first 2 essays because it was more description than criticality, critical analysis. But yeah, I learned over time, and obviously I had to do quite a lot of that for my PhD, because you have to, really, otherwise they don't give you a PhD.
Your inner Sherlock must have been kind of dying inside you. It's like, no, look beyond what's in front of you. Don't just assimilate information as it comes.
That's it.
Yeah, it's and in a sense, I've also come to encounter that difference. and we will get to the culture shock of later when you came to Warwick to do your postgraduate. But yeah, it is certainly encouraged to, they give you the information in a sense, but they give you the information for you to look for information rather than the information that you need to learn. So they kind of teach you how to think rather than what to think. Yeah. Whereas, and it's certainly similar in Peru, where we still have a more, outdated type of teaching, where it is basically the transmission of knowledge from a more knowledgeable person to another knowledgeable person. But after the exam, that goes like this. So,
yeah, that's very, very familiar. Everything that you said there, we, even at degree level, we were asked to look for all the answers in the textbooks, which, at school is fine, but probably not at degree level. So yeah, and we were not really encouraged to question our professors and teachers.
Is that to do with a sense of or the relationship with authority and with kind of hierarchy in that sense? You ought not to question your superiors, aka your teachers.
Yeah, I think it is a bit of that, but also it's this is what I meant by everything is a little bit more mass market, or just there's just so many people. There was never really enough time to have that kind of one-to-one interaction, because there was one professor to lots of students. So there was just never enough resource. even if some of the professors were very happy to have that kind of debate or discussion, there was never really enough time for it to go around all the students.
Yeah, and even then, there's way too many people for it to be personalized education, and even that would be way too expensive to approach. It's quite clear the differences here. I quite like that the critical thinking that Warwick specifically, since we're both alumni there. I don't know what you call two people that are from the same alma mater, but that. So then you came to the UK, and did you also find that the cultural shock coming from the education side, or was it also from other other interactions, cultural interactions, whilst in the UK?
Well, I don't think there was that much of a cultural shock on all aspects. Yes, the education system and the approach was a bit of a shock. Funnily enough, it was a bit of a shock that not everybody spoke in perfect BBC English. The fact that there were so many different English accents really threw me. I thought everybody spoke like they did in the BBC. So I spent a lot of time trying to understand different accents in the UK, and I remember saying "I beg your pardon" about 50 times every day. So that was a bit of a shock. I think, nothing else really, because I think I had kind of prepared myself through reading and through kind of exposing myself to whatever information I could find before I came to the UK to kind of help me prepare what life in society was like. I mean, one of the things, if you're interested in my experiences as a foreign student, one of the first things I did, because I was here on a student loan and money was very, very tight. So one of the first things I did is I signed up to be a cleaner, which was my first job in the UK. So this was while I was, living in student halls. And one of the other reasons why I did that was to just try and understand what society and culture was like. So I remember that half the cleaning team were students, but the other half were like local people who lived in and around Coventry, in and around the university. And my favorite part of the job was when we used to have our tea breaks, and these, they were primarily ladies kind of in their, sort of late 40s and 30s and 40s. And they would talk about, what TV they saw last night and what they cooked for dinner, and, and all maybe some other juicy tidbits about what's happening in their life. And I remember there was me and there was another friend of mine who was Chinese, and we were like starry-eyed, like trying to understand what their life was like. So it was just one way of immersing yourself in the real life, which isn't just university. So I did stuff like that to help me assimilate.
It was like, you know, it's a bit like the cultural reversal of, oh, look, you know, the Peruvians in Peru and how they interact, and going
Yeah,
beyond kind of the touristy side of things. Say certainly the BBC, Stonehenge, the Big Ben, you know, and whatnot.
yeah,
You know, all the
yeah,
cultural icons we see it when we get our visas. You know, they're in the banners, and they're
yeah.
certainly advertised.
Yeah,
that part.
I was also a bit surprised, you know, just kind of coming off Heathrow, you know, how certain parts of London were really dirty, you know, because I was expecting everything to look much cleaner than that. But so yeah, there were like
Expecting to see the
small
forests and the grasslands, yeah.
green rolling hills everywhere.
Yeah, no, it was certainly a shock for me coming to London. First of all, how cold it was. Like
Yeah,
that alone blew me away. I landed in Heathrow for the first time as well. Just like many people, if you are watching this and you've yet to come to the UK, by all means be prepared. It is cold. If you come from a warmish country or somewhere that's close to the equator, bring layers. Bring layers by all means. University starts in September. Bring a scarf, bring a coat. I landed in Heathrow and I saw, you know, I was like, oh, landing in Heathrow Airport, outside temperature was 13 degrees. Now I thought 13 degrees. Now the coldest it gets in Peru, we are Lima, it's a semi-tropical weather. So, you know, get the coldest it gets in winter is 16 degrees. Gentle drizzle, not really that cold. There's a lot of humidity, but that's another factor.
yeah,
So I thought, all right, well, 16 degrees, the coldest it gets, 13 must not be that bad. So I thought, and besides the sun was out. So I thought, oh no, that's probably, you know, air temperature or something like that.
yeah,
And, you know, I thought, well, if the sun's out, that means it must be warm. You know,
yeah,
there's no way the sun could be out just as decoration. So, you know, I changed to shorts and kind of like a t-shirt, step out the airport, froze to death, run back inside, open my suitcase and put 5-6 layers. What was winter like for you? Well, the winters on campus and at uni.
Oh gosh, I saw my first snowfall when I was on campus, and it was just like magic. I mean, to be honest, yeah, like you know, when the flight, when the doors closed on the flight, it was 34 degrees, and then when I landed in Heathrow, it was 9 degrees, and like
beautiful.
you, I was a bit like, you know, it was a theoretical understanding of what 9 degrees might be like. Although I had spent the winter in Delhi, which does get quite cold. But yeah, I mean, the first winter was, there was just so many new experiences, though the weather was just like one in a collection of all kinds of new things. But no, it was magical. I mean, because I came to the UK to do a master's, which was only 1 year, it flew by, and it just felt just absolutely magical. I mean, I still, even now, when it gets to about sort of end of September, early October, and the smells of autumn takes me back to when I first got here for the first time, and it kind of, I almost kind of action replay what life was like for me in my head. So yeah, it was happy.
One triggers the other, yeah. Bit like Pavlov's dogs.
That's exactly
So in hindsight, obviously at the time you were kind of a student seeking something in Britain, you know, looking for a future here. And that was, and you had certain limitations, that of being a student. You didn't have the scope that you have now as a professional, as an established professional, because there are many professionals, some of which look for establishing themselves here. So in that sense, in hindsight, what were the cultural leaders, in a sense, or and because I want to jump into the more industry side of things.
Sure.
What were the cultural leaders in the Midlands at the time, and what can you tell me about their identity? Was it a perhaps less diverse Midlands at the time, back in the early 2000s?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on what you're considering as the cultural sector, because obviously the sector is huge and there's lots of categories within it. The Midlands has always been a very diverse place. It's a huge amount. There's a huge migrant population, but I don't mean just migrants as in people who've newly arrived, but it's the Midlands is made up of people that have moved to the UK over centuries. So it's an actually diverse population, whether you're talking about Birmingham, which is the center of the largest city in the Midlands, or smaller places like Coventry, or Leicester or Nottingham. I think the cultural leadership that I was exposed to first, I did find that to be quite established, quite British, people who had been in the country or were born here. The top leadership was quite male. It's probably a little bit more female now than it was before, but the top jobs were primarily male. And I mean, I found that I didn't find that difficult or intimidating. Coming from India, I'm used to working and being exposed to quite a male environment anyway. And I think when you're young, you don't really care about that. You just kind of, go for it and you do what you want. You don't think about, okay, will I be accepted because, the leaders don't look like me? Well, does that mean that it'll impact on my career trajectory through the sector? I didn't really stop to think about things like that.
Yeah, one of the precisely getting onto that, because a huge part of identity and identities within an already diverse place as the West Midlands as is, I think comes a lot into play when you're creating work, because you then think, who do you create it for? What do you create it for? It's there's a multiplicity of needs as well. Yeah. And whether we find companies that cater for them or not, then I think that's like the big mix we find ourselves in. Not at the moment, because there's nothing going at the moment as much. But I actually wanted to tap into a little something that you shared. And this was back in 2012 under the hashtag funny signs. I don't know if you remember from it much of it, but so you shared a picture from the WBS building, and it reads, a ladies vending machine is located in the ground floor ladies toilet. Now and the caption you add is, forget match.com. Grab some change and head to the ground floor. Now, obviously, that is hilarious, because when I read that, it's like, that's another thing we don't realize about some British people. No offense, educated British people, but some cannot, they don't write as well as we think they do. We think that everyone speaks the Queen's English and that they write perfectly. And, to find this, it's like, oh, they can also make grammar mistakes. It's not just me in my English as second language course.
Yeah. But I'd forgotten about that. But yeah, thank you for reminding me.
No.
That's funny. Absolutely. I found that. But I think, it's funny you should mention that. I think the British sense of humor is one of the reasons why I have been in the UK for as long as I have, because I absolutely adore it. And I think, some people get it and some people don't, and the people that don't get it find it quite hard to live in the UK, because it's a country that really does know how to have a laugh and laugh at themselves, and some of it is actually quite caustic. It's not really simple laughter. It's really quite self-deprecating, and it's quite charged, and I feel quite at home with that. So that's why I fit, I guess.
Yeah, they take the mick, as
yes,
they say. Yeah. For any English people that might be watching, it probably sounds very weird, as using expressions that you would probably use and probably pronounce different to us. But that's quite a nice experience to be on the other end. I remember talking. I had last week. I had John Etchley Bond, who was a member of the Fitzrovia Radio Hour. It's a company that does radio shows, in essence, and audio sound-driven performances. They've been to Edinburgh and stuff. And I remember we talked about politics, because he had quite strong opinions against his local MP. But the way he would voice his distaste with this person would be very eloquent, but at the same time very charged and angry. You know, he was proper angry about the things he discussed, but he would never be out front as saying, "Oh, this is such and such," you know, as probably the Americans would, or in their use of language. And I said, well, that's the name calling. I said, well, it's probably not useful for political, you know, for advancing politically as a country. It's so funny. it's so entertaining. I remember when Trump was invited, well, he wasn't invited, but when Trump got elected and they wanted to ban him, I remember there was a discussion in Parliament. And there was this MP, I completely forgot what party he belonged to, but he said, Donald Trump, from the cavernous depths of his democratic ignorance. I was like, wow, the cavernous depths. I was like, well said, sir. Well said. He still came, you know, he still, you know, didn't care for anything, but but it was so beautiful to hear. So poetic.
They also made this huge inflatable Trump baby.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think the British people find a different way of protesting than guns and sticks, you know, and I think I come from that kind of a country where everything is very literal. So I remember, I mean, there's a radio show which I think a lot of people in the UK know, but I'm not sure all your listeners would, called Dead Ringers, which is on Radio 4, and it's basically a sketch show, and they take the mick out of everything and current affairs. But I remember listening to something like that, and I kept, you know, saying to my friends, "Are you actually allowed to say that? I mean, will these people actually live?" So because
will they not have their car set on fire like after cricket matches, say,
or being assassinated in the dead of the night? Like, are you actually allowed to say things like that about your politicians and about your queen? And so yeah, it's interesting.
So the different relationship with authority. I mean, they took a picture, what was this Labour candidate, you know, they took a picture of him eating a sandwich, didn't he? And he lost an election because of that. And probably a lot of you English people will be saying, "Oh, it's so and so. Do forgive me. I'm not well acquainted with UK politics." What I do want to bring up, as we're talking about the industry itself, you also cited again back in 2012. So I'll hopefully bring that to memory. The caption. So it is a study, or the results of a study of a poll, where the question is, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statements about how Britain has changed since 1948? And it gives a percentage answers of agree or disagree. The first question typed says, women have more choices now than they did back in 1948. 88% would agree, 4% disagreed. The third question, which is the more equally distributed one, is relations between different ethnic groups are better now than in 1948, and that is surprising. That's 44% agree, 29% disagree. The caption reads, "Has Britain become a better society for women?" And with a lot of women, and especially women of color and of different ethnic backgrounds, how could you, or what could you say about that, about the results? And we're talking 2012, so that's 8 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, obviously a lot has actually happened since 2012, which has probably swayed those percentages a lot more. You know, a lot has happened in the last 2 years around Brexit and everything that happened after Brexit in terms of the intolerant nature of some of the people being on show rather than being something that, you know, doesn't get discussed in polite company. I think, I mean, I probably shared those because I found them quite interesting at that point in time, because you do think of the UK, you know, being one of the richest countries in the West, having, you know, very progressive societies and very equal, you know, things having moved on from the dark ages in terms of equality and women's position. But yeah, I found that quite surprising about how it felt for other people. I mean, for me, it's interesting actually, because I don't know how to say this without sounding weird, but I don't really see myself as a BME person, or maybe I don't even always see myself as a woman because I don't see myself, other people see me. So so when you look at me, you might see me as a female BME person who works in the arts, whereas I just see myself as somebody who is, works in arts and culture, works hard, and enjoys being here. So yeah, so my personal experience, I don't have very much different to share, but I do find it quite interesting that the position of women and the position of equality within different communities still is a lot less progressive than most people would think it is in the UK. And it's probably got worse. Those percentages have probably got worse over the last few years than better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and especially it being the well, not just the relationship between men and women, but also the emphasis that we've put in say, and I'm picking the word and I'm air quoting it because it might mean different things for different people, diversity. The emphasis we've picked up on diversity since 2012 until 2020 is massive, culturally speaking, in the sense of cultural discourse or global cultural discourse, or Western, perhaps, cultural discourse, because we can both agree that the UK is miles more progressive than our countries of origin in many senses, in many respects. So obviously, compared to that, yes, it is perhaps more, they've progressed more in those relationships, but when looking at it from within, then, there might still be some frictions in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So when you got to SAMPAD, first of all, how did you land SAMPAD in the first place? And how does one take the jump?
Okay, well, it all came about in a weird fashion. So I was doing my master's and in the process of picking a topic for my master's dissertation, and I wanted to write about the different generations of people and how they and then I picked South Asian people because obviously I knew a bit more about them, being from that background myself. So I spoke to my dissertation supervisor, Dr. Chris Bilton, and he said, well, if you want to write about the different generations and how they consume, and I wanted to write about how they consume media, radio and television, which is culturally specific. So basically, how do South Asian people consume South Asian content, media content, and whether there's any difference between the different generations, first, second, third generation people that lived in the UK, and do they see different things and do they look for different things? So I was talking about my topic, and Dr. Chris Belton said, well, actually, there's an organization in Birmingham called SAMPAD, maybe you should approach them and see, if you could do an internship with them, and in return, they can give you access to their audience base. They're not a media company, but they do performing arts and they do all kinds of different, different art forms. So that's how it came about. I found their number on the internet and I gave them a call and I said, I would like an internship. Can I come and see you? I have these skills. I'm happy to offer you all of them for free. I want access to your audiences. And that's how it came about, really. And then I went over and I did an internship with them. I started doing projects for them that they didn't give me to do, and kind of basically tried to make myself useful. And then a job came along, and I applied and got it. So that's the gist.
Yeah, no, and I actually want to tap into the making yourself useful. How important it is to make oneself kind of available, in a sense, at least when you're starting, obviously, because normally one wouldn't work for free, except when there's a transaction, whether it is data and audiences with respect to your skills. So talk to us a little bit about how important it is to make a way, even if you're given hardly a bit of work. Oh, you're the intern, you're not even English, so like, how does one wiggle that way,
Yeah.
the way in.
Yeah, so I think, one of the key things is about making yourself useful is to really take time to understand the organization and, what is important to them. And I kind of spend a lot of time on that, actually, even before I went and met them. So when I met them, I knew that I had one shot to impress them with not just how much I knew about them, but also how much I had engaged with, what they wanted to do, what their ambitions were, where they were going as an organization, and how I could fit with that. I think that's quite important. When you're making, even for internships, when you're making an approach to a new cultural creative organization, it's really important to show that fit and to show the initiative, rather than just kind of make blanket, approaches and say, hey, I'm good, and I can come and work for you. It's really, you have to show that kind of vested interest in the organization. That's how I did it. And then when I first started with them, they gave me a couple of things that I was working on, but I would just get stuff done quite quickly. And rather than kind of going to the managers and that were managing me, going, okay, give me some more work, because they don't want that. They're already quite busy. I would kind of look into the nooks and crannies and see what kind of information might help them. So for example, I started working on some databases that, they've been thinking about compiling, but had never really compiled. So I kind of sat in a meeting and they were talking about this database. Oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had this database? So when I didn't have anything to do, I quickly built it. And then I kind of took it to them going, I know that somebody said you'd quite like a database. Here you go. It's things like that. It's picking things up like that.
Yeah, and it's certainly, and we kind of make a big thing, not just British and overseas, but we especially with people jumping into their first kind of internships or trying to land a job. It is, I cannot stress how crucial it is to research what you said, research the organization, go beyond, take a step further, and once you're in, try to make every second in there count. Not to obviously overexert yourself, but to prove your mettle. Like in any competitive scene, once you're in there, you make the most out of it. And I actually and I will bring Agatha Christie yet again. She wrote the following. He said, you gave too much rein to your imagination. Imagination is a good servant and a bad master. The simplest explanation is always the most likely. It's always most likely just, all right, what do you want to do? Do you want to work? Call. Do you want to get something done? Plan and execute. Do you want to, and sometimes we think, oh, but it is hard, or we have these limitations. Yes, there are. What are you going to do about them? Like, how are you going to, and it might sound as a harsh thing to say, especially in these times, but almost everyone that I've had on has agreed on, well, you got to be proactive then. You're indoors. All right, what can you be doing? And on your end, what could you tell young people wanting to get into your field of work? What can they be doing right this instant to improve themselves, or to learn, or to keep developing themselves personally and professionally?
Yeah, I mean, there is the sector that we are working in and we're interested in is hugely competitive. So the only way of making it is to really stand out, and your marks is not going to do it for you. Of course, if you come from a good institution and you have some really good, you've done really well, that might help a little bit, sort of getting you into the right doors. But in terms of you staying there or being noticed by people, is totally in your own hands. So I think what people could be doing is really using this time to learn more and to really focus on what is it that they have to give and what is it that the sector needs. So for example, this is a good time to really understand, which part of the sector are you most interested in. I know most of the young people are probably starting out and they take a job anywhere that would have them. However, are there certain sectors or certain functions within creative cultural organizations that you have an affinity for, or you have a huge interest in which case research those areas, have all of that in your hands when you are able to walk into an interview, or when you're able to have an interview. So if there are 3 top organizations that you've always wanted to work in, this is a good time to research them from top to bottom. Find out, how these organizations have been doing financially, program-wise, in terms of partnerships and networks, who they've worked with in the past, what their ambitions are for the future, so that by the time you're able to talk to them, or once the lockdown is over, you pretty much have a master's degree in these 3 or 4 organizations or subsectors that you want to work in, because this is something that you can do by yourself. And we know in the creative and cultural sector, it's all about people. So trying to identify who those key people are, and what career journeys have they had, and how have they kind of moved up. And obviously your series is pretty much based on that, what you're doing. But trying to unearth and dig and try and understand what makes the sector tick. This is a really good time to do all of that. So yeah, that would be my suggestion. So just because, nobody's available to talk to you right now, you can't get those job interviews at the moment because nobody's hiring, doesn't mean you kind of wait till that happens. You can use this time to do quite a bit. And I mean, the last thing is skills. I think, there is, if there's say 15 of you who've done the same degree, are there any sort of skills? There are sort of, there are courses and skills that you could be acquiring as well at this point in time, which might be formal, but it could equally be informal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I remember you saying at some point, when we had a long chat after the Spark event where we met originally, but I remember you saying something that it was really valuable, especially for your particular field of expertise, and for anyone listening that is interested in that field of expertise. You said that you liked people, you were looking, or you valued people that had respect for data and that had respect for research. Can you expand a little bit on that, and what other good traits and habits people in your field should aspire to have, or should have to kind of survive within the environment?
Yeah, well, if you are looking to work within research, I think, I mean, obviously researchers are trained. You can train to be a researcher, but I think to be a good researcher, it's almost something that it's a little bit more innate within your personality. You need that. You need the ability to be curious and want to know more than what is presented to you. But equally, you have to also be somebody who's got a lot of integrity and respect for information, for, for just kind of the world in general. So I guess what I meant by when I said I like people who have respect for data is, there are a lot of, when we talk normally, we make a lot of assumptions, and we all, we're all human beings. We all have our own biases. But I think a good researcher and somebody who respects data is one who is able to suspend their own bias and is able to, objectively see what is in front of them, or what is even behind what is presented to them, and talk for that data rather than talk for how they feel. So that's what I mean by respect for data. So, because, I'm sure you and I have a certain way of looking at the world, and I think, okay, you might think, I don't know, I'm making assumptions about you now. You might think that, opera in the UK is kind of, done its time, for example. There's no actual new thing or new ground that can be broken because it's all been done. And, this might be something that you have gathered from your understanding of the sector or from your interactions. And we all have opinions like that. But if you respect data, and if you're somebody who is able to be objective, you will be, when you're doing a project on opera, you will be able to suspend your own judgment and actually see what's presented in front of you, and actually let that speak rather than let yourself speak. If that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And in the topic of assumptions, and I think that's a valuable lesson for anyone. And even if you are going to just be a creative, you will eventually have to encounter ticket sales, filling up a room, a percentage that you need to deal with a particular venue, or what is your strategy? What is the business strategy for your organization? Whether it is pure, whether you do the purely creative side, you will have to put food on the table, make ends meet. And you need to be sincere with those numbers, else you won't get paid what you think you should get paid for your work. So in this show, I certainly champion the idea that we can learn from everyone in every kind of aspect of this industry. That's why I'm more than buzzing to have musical theater people, directors, researchers, because it's very holistic. It feeds off everything else, because we need technicians, but you also need audiences to make data from, or not to make them from, but to register. And in the topic of assumptions, I'll throw yet another Agatha Christie quote. She writes, "I often wonder why the whole world is so prone to generalize. Generalizations are seldom, if ever, true, and are usually uttered inaccurately." And again, I don't know if I'm citing Agatha Christie, and it's great that you just so happen to have read her and that can offend to you, because it speaks to a lot of your work. And this is what I think that'll tickle you the right way. It says, "Good advice is always certain to be ignored, but that's no reason not to give it." Can you tell us about instances where perhaps and can you talk to us a bit about the perhaps not the friction, but the displeased organizations, or some, as we would colloquially refer to them, as artsy people in the industry.
Yeah.
And when you present perhaps data that isn't favorable or not what they expected, or you make assumptions based on the data that they've given you, can you tell us a bit about those experiences?
Yeah, I mean, it does happen off and on quite a bit, actually. And I think there is not just researchers, arts managers in general have over the years been at loggerheads with the artsy people that you talk about. So there are people who want to produce or make work in the way that they have conceived what they would like to make. And they sometimes don't want to believe that other people might feel any differently. And if there's figures to back up the fact that people feel differently, they don't want to believe the figures. And that has happened quite a bit. And it can become quite a tussle, especially if you are also not somebody who's within that organization. If you're an external consultant, sometimes you feel like you're delivering bad news, and they don't want that bad news, and it's easier to kind of find flaws in the reporting, or find flaws in the data to say, no, I know you're saying this because the figures say it, but actually if you look at the figures in a different way, then maybe it'll say what I needed to say. So this is what I call research by expectation. So it's like this is what we want, this is what we expect.
Confirmation bias.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that does happen quite a bit. And in the sector where it's all about relationships and it's all about being in everyone's good books, it's actually a really hard, and this is a good thing to think about if you're thinking about if you're a young person wanting to work in research. You have to have not just integrity and sort of be quite I don't know what the word is, I want to say strong, but not necessarily strong, but you have to be quite open to the fact that there will be points in your career, and a lot of them, not just once or twice, where you would really have to stand by your convictions, and you would have to face scenarios where you're being challenged a lot. And the only thing that you have to fall back on is your reputation, your integrity, and your belief that you've done things in the most objective way possible. So I don't know, it's important to put things like this on the table for people who are trying to make decisions on whether this is the right sector for them. There have been many instances, and there have been different outcomes of that. There have been outcomes where we've had to say, okay, we can't change the figures to suit your expectations, so we will have to leave it there. Or there have been times when, we have discussed, if the research doesn't say exactly what they thought it was going to say, but there might be other things that the research says which relates to where they want to be going. So it's not always that people look at findings and go, yeah, I'm going to take that, I'm going to go that way, I'm going to take your recommendations. It doesn't.
There's always a pushback.
Absolutely, and you have to be quite you have to be quite open to being able to deal with those pushbacks as well.
And so the important lessons for creatives would be to, obviously, just as they can be empathetic with their audience and their work speaking to their audience, I think opening to that other world and way of thinking, put an analytical person with a creative person, you're going to get more disagreements than not. But yet we coexist in this arts environment and cultural environments. We need each other, symbiotically speaking. And I remember, and I'm sure you remember as well, when you presented data in the Spark chat back in February of this year, before the pandemic. There was a time before the pandemic, if the world has gone south and and you're listening from an underground bunker, that's what life used to be. We were trying, and I remember you presented general data on the area and specific data on audiences and year groups, in a sense, and what motivated them to go consume culture and consume these products. And what was a mitigating factor. And I remember this gentleman got up, raised his hand, and he was like, well, you're making all these claims, because I remember you put, I think it was orchestra or classical music as like one of the least consumed of the year of whatever the range of your investigation was. And this gentleman got personally, very perhaps offended. And he started challenging, like, no, and I don't think you have the authority to say these things because, and he cited, because there's this event organized every year and that brings 500 or so people. And I turn around and think to myself, 500 people is probably what the Warwick Arts Centre makes in a couple of days. And not even that. It's how does one best approach, say, someone who has a fixed mentality, to talk about fixed and growth mentalities, and how do you pick your battles, or do we try to come to an understanding? What do you say would be the best approach for those getting into this field?
Yeah, I think we pick our battles in life, so you would pick your battles in any situation. However, I think I would say the latter. In specific examples like that one, obviously at that presentation, there wasn't enough time for us to have a one-to-one conversation, although I did after the session have a conversation with the gentleman that you're talking about, and explain to him that I wasn't saying that there's no classical music. All I'm saying is that I have no data to tell you how much classical music there is. And we discussed the fact that actually there is a real need for more data about classical music if they want to make the case for how important it is for that region. So there's a resolution there. But no, I think the latter, it's important to discuss and to come to an understanding and to explain where you're coming from. And this is why, again, I guess a top tip for people who want to, or not, I might have put everybody off by now, people who want to do research in this area, you have to know your stuff. You really do have to know your stuff. You can't bluff it. You do have to know what you're talking about. And if you don't know, because you're human, you have to have the humility to be able to say, look, I don't know this right now, but I can go and find out for you, or this is where my knowledge stops. So I think when I say integrity, I think I also mean transparency. You have to be confident enough to know that this just means it's not personal. It's not about you. It doesn't mean you're a bad human being. It just means that you haven't looked into it, or, whatever.
And
I think
yeah,
that's quite,
uh-huh.
that's quite.
And that's like you said, you know, that being down to earth and trying to put, in a sense, your ego aside. There's a lot of egos there's big egos especially in the creative side, as there will be in almost every industry, but they are quite prominent in ours, especially at the seniority level of the creatives. At least in my experience.
Yeah.
And here's when I get to Earthen Lamp, because one of the most interesting side of Earthen Lamp, both as represented by Vishalakshi Roy, the director, as well as the website and social media and the way you present yourselves, because of course it is run by people that know their stuff, is that there's a nice dichotomy, and I'll expand on this. Agatha Christie said, "Very few of us are what we seem," she wrote, and in a sense, it would seem as though, if we were to make an assumption, that a consultant, a company that does bespoke analysis and audience development and whatnot is quite, you know, serious and down to earth and very data driven, and you know they read their Sherlock Holmes and they close themselves off, they give you what you need and then they walk off. But it's not quite that, because and I find this a fantastic way to put it. If you go to their website, which you will find down here in the description of the video, is the following. In the contact section of Earthen Lamp, it says, "If you would like to discuss the dark corners in your organization or business, or just fancy a chat, see how we can help, drop us a line." There is no more playful, engaging, and more kind of tongue-in-cheek way of approaching someone. You know, does that derive directly from your innate sense of humor?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's probably derived from the fact that the overall very human people, and yeah, I don't think we can, you know, we probably tried a little bit because, you know, with the photographs where we look like that, but I don't think any of us are very consultancy, if you know what I mean. I think we are just people who genuinely inquisitive and can do stuff, who would like to help. You know, if you have a problem, we love problems, we like finding solutions. Give us a problem, you know, we'll work on it with you. That is the approach. The brand Earthen Lamp actually came from that dark corners idea. So I guess, you know, I was quite keen to get that dark corners thing in. You know, we spent a lot of time trying to find a brand name. We did the whole, oh, it needs to be a fruit and a color. You know, we did all of that. And then the Earthen Lamp name came from the fact that it's, you know, every civilization, if you go way, way back, every civilization has some kind of lamp or light made out of, well, earth, you know, and it's something that's quite basic. If you want to light stuff up, something that's quite basic, quite straightforward, quite simple, and that was all sort of in line with the brand that we wanted to be. So that's where it, you know, that's where it all kind of comes together.
You're the light for those organizations.
That's
certainly. Yes, absolutely. No, and it's great because it's quite down to earth. It's kind of saying, we know you don't know. That's why you're coming to us. We know you want what we have to offer, but we're also aware that we'll help in the best way we can, and there's no reason to, you know, there's no need to pretend otherwise. You know, it's all right. If something's not working, bring it to us. If ticket sales are going down after, you know, you've invested X amount of money, we'll see why. We'll you know, we know you don't know. It's okay not to know. That's why we're here. You know, that's kind of what we do, and that ethos it's fabulous. I think it and again, to tap into a bit of culture again, it says it's saying what you mean and saying exactly what's in your mind. That transparency, I think, and this is me making an assumption, I don't know if you agree with me, but this is not something that perhaps some British organizations and or people have developed as much because of the way they are, just being frontal about certain things. and saying, you know what, this is not working. Yes, I agree. No, I disagree. It's more along the, as eloquent as they can be when insulting each other and calling each other names, they're also very eloquent in their disagreement, almost as though making it sound as, you know, it's not quite that.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I've worked not fully public sector, but you know, in the funded arts sector before I set up Earthen Lamp, and there's a lot of things that could be said straightforward, but is kind of enveloped in lots of beautiful text, and I just think life's too short for that. I think it's important to just say things like it is, and to say it in a way that people can see who you are as a person. Because at the end of the day, people do business with people. You know, you can have brands, you can have marketing, you can have beautiful text, but if people don't like you and don't believe in you, they're not going to work with you. It's as simple as that. So it's being yourself is, I think there's a saying about that, you know, it's good to be yourself because everybody else is taken. So.
Yeah, exactly. And to find sometimes you just need someone to tell you things exactly as they think. That's why one confides in a best friend, for example, but sometimes even then that information can be slanted in your favor, or, you know, and I think debunking that, or at least presenting an alternative to it, I think it's perhaps a nicer alternative to the blabbering that can go about sometimes. And I certainly encourage for those who are a bit unsure as to what we're talking about, have a look at Earthen Lamp's website. It's as straightforward as it can get. It's down to the point. We get, you know, but it never loses its personality. I love the little section where it says, "I am obsessed with so and so," or "the last thing I'm reading is so and so," because and that's why I focus on profiles, because we know what you do, we can research that, but also knowing the sweet tooth behind it, it's fabulous, and I think it adds that nice little flavor behind the person, rather than just, "So where did you start your career? Oh, how did you go about," which is necessary information, but it can also be a bit boring. I don't know. To come to the final 5-10 minutes of the chat, it's been a wonderful chat. Thank you for it so far. I'd actually like to tap into these little keywords that we've been kind of touching upon throughout our conversation. First of that one being diversity. What do you think the role of diversity, A, is in practice, and B, is in the theoretical kind of desired sense of the word in our sector?
Okay. I think in practice, diversity, and when I say diversity, I mean it in the broadest sense possible. So I don't mean diversity just in the way people look or speak. I mean in the way people think, in the way people, you know, different things you might like. I think trying to make arts and culture more diverse just makes it more interesting and more rounded, and makes it a lot more relevant with touch points for different people. So if you're thinking about audiences, for example, you know, there's so much conversation about, you know, why do people come to something? Why don't they come? How can we make them come? And all of that stuff around non-attenders or people that, you know, don't attend very often. If your work, or if your, what you're producing is truly diverse, then there's something in it for everyone, or there's something in it for different people, if not everyone. So the more diverse it is, the more diverse the sector is, the more relevant it is for everyone. And, you know, for example, if you just think about the Earthen Lamp team, I'm just as a little microcosm, you know, we are from lots of different countries. We speak different languages. We have very varied interests, both cultural and also social. You know, some of us like to crochet, whereas others like to walk up mountains. You know, some of us like to cook, whereas others play the harp. So it's very so actually for all of us to find some cultural content that we feel, oh, actually, that's a bit like me, or that's something that I can relate to. I think that's what diversity does. So, for example, currently, one of the biggest things that's going to happen in this region is the Coventry City of Culture, and we're all kind of really like looking at that program to see how is it going to bring all of us together and make it relevant to all of us. I mean, we're all quite excited, and as I'm sure you are too, in this region, because it's going to be quite a big thing for us. And I think that'd be a really good one. That'd be a really good one to see how diversity in play, because I know that those are the plans for the City of Culture.
As of today, the day we're recording the interview, and this is also for the audience, being the 7th of August of 2020, City of Culture announced last month that they were pushing the festival starting May 2020, running up to May 2021. So there will hopefully be a chance to kind of prepare the city a bit longer. Yeah. Before the start of that. What can you tell us about the audiences? So the audiences and how their behavior might have changed. I know you've done research and conducted certain surveys. If they were still going on, and if they're still going on, do let us know, because we'd like to put it down in the comment section. But otherwise, you've studied and certainly looked into how audiences would react, or at least what is the expectations from them when facing certain cultural products and heritage products. How do you think they will look, or what are your, not just assumptions, but in this case, I'm asking you to make a projection into May 2020. What do you think audiences and audience behavior will be like in face of City of Culture?
Do you mean related to the pandemic, or just related to the City of Culture?
I'd say, I know this is a big research question, but I'd say a bit of both. How, because City of Culture involves, or any City of Culture involves, masses of people, and that inherently brings questions about COVID.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why the program's been pushed back. I'm sure there are lots and lots of other practical reasons as well. I think the City of Culture, and we know this from other cities of culture that have happened in the UK, but also around the world and in Europe. The City of Culture program is built around attracting as many people as possible, both from those cities, so they are residents of that city, so that they are involved in feeling proud or feeling showcasing their city, but also there's a huge motivation to bring new people into that city, to introduce the city to the world in some way. I think Coventry is going to be similar. If we can park COVID aside for just a second, and the infection rates and all of that, I think it will bring lots of people to Coventry. Crossed. It will get people off Coventry quite excited and quite proud about the place that they live in. And Coventry as a city has a lot to be proud about. So I'm quite positive and optimistic in general, but I'm definitely positive and optimistic about audiences in the future. I think the impact of COVID has been that things have slowed down a little bit. So, people are still not unsure. They're still not trusting all the advice that is going out, because it's confusing as well. So things will be a little bit slow to start, but I think equally there are people out there who are just really missing cultural content. So they will find a way.
Yeah.
I mean, we've just done, on the other lamp, we've just done a blog about museums that are opening up and how they're doing it. We're about to do a blog about some of outdoor work that's actually starting. So I mean in the real world, I don't mean on the computer. So things are starting to happen, and I think audiences will come back.
I've certainly heard the argument of, it'll be tough to reactivate everything and to bring everything. It's like people are craving for anything to happen outside, and for a reason to go outside. I also share your optimism in that regard. I perhaps a lot more cautious in that I'm not sure how and this is to do with weather and what Britain's relationship with outdoor performances can be when when half the year it's extremely cold for us. It is rather cold, or it snows or rains, especially up north and in Wales. I feel that there's a great opportunity for the UK to find an outdoorsy culture such as perhaps the more Mediterranean countries have, and a relationship with lots and lots of people just pour down in the streets, hopefully by then we'll be in a much better place in terms of a cure. But other than that, no, it's certainly a great opportunity, and something that everyone that is in the area must be looking forward to. And even if you're not in the area and watching this, do take a look. Do look into City of Culture, check out their website. There's always opportunities out there, and there's constant updates on what the festival will look like. Wrapping up this great chat we've had, I would very much like you to address our audiences for the last time, and perhaps what word of advice could you give them? And I know you've given a lot of lessons throughout this conversation, but one particularly with regards to the future of the industry. We've never seen something as calamitous as this event. We know we are going to be better, but that's obviously easier said than done. Yeah. What can you say?
Be optimistic, be energetic, and be resilient. I think, I think those kind of positivity and positive energies will make sure that, not just helps you start off in the sector, but also helps the sector. So rather than think of all the things that could go wrong and all the things that will go wrong, if you build positivity within, then you're helping yourself, but you're also helping the sector. So I guess that's more of a request rather than just advice. And I think, whether we have a pandemic or not, it's actually really important within the cultural sector to be very energetic and to be very resilient. You can't let disappointment get to you and put you off things for very long. Whether you're a content producer, a director, an actor, a researcher, an arts manager, this is a field where you have to pick yourself up and be positive. So I guess that's my lesson.
That's wonderful. Last question. Let me take you back then to the very first days before you went to university, before you even knew you were going to jump into this sector and end up where you are now, an Earthen lamp, and the great people behind it, Clelia, Micah. By the way, if you're watching this, a very warm, distant hug to you both. And thinking back into everything you've done, if you were to, say, time travel and meet Vishalakshi pre-university, not as a means to change the past, because obviously that's counterproductive, but as advice to 18-year-old self, what would you say to you?
Oh gosh, my advice to the 18-year-old me would be to keep at it, as an 18-year-old, I was working quite hard, and I think that's really helped. I would probably say to the 18-year-old, sleep a little bit more, because because that just gets scarcer and scarcer as you grow older. So right now, as a full-time, although it's all part-time, but as an academic, a business owner, and a mum, I feel like I'm a part-time all three things rather than I feel like I'm a full-time all three things rather than a part-time three things. So I would have said, carry on with that energy, be inquisitive. When opportunity knocks the door, open it. Maybe sleep a little bit more, because I wish I had done that and not been as sleep deprived as I am now. Probably not earth-shattering advice to my 18-year-old self.
That's okay. No, that's brilliant. That tells a lot about yourself and your lack of sleep to an extent. But it's been wonderful chatting to you. Thank you so much, Vishalakshi. It's been great. Let me just remind people, and we'll also include Earthen Lamp social media down in the description. It's at Earthen Lamp. How do you call that line?
It's an underscore.
Underscore. Thank you. At Earthen _lamp on Twitter, and you can look them up, look up their website, earthenlamp.com. With that, that is our 5th episode of Offbeat Talks. Thank you all very much for tuning in, and thank you very much, Vishalakshi, for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been brilliant. Thank you so much.